Elliott Haines III, how you doing?
Good, Andrew Fisher, and yourself.
Yes, doing great. Happy 2021. And what's so happy about it after the way 2020 went? You really don't know how much hell we could be in for. But all right, we got to think positive. So let's think positive now.
Mm-hmm.
And well, you've already appeared on my show once before to talk about well, was it only water? It's a miracle the way you were able to talk for 2 hours nonstop without me having to interrupt you once. And I thought it was just about one little subject, miracle water or whatever. And now all of a sudden it was a 2 hour talk about mixing in a lot of things. I was quite impressed, I must say, with your ability to keep talking about stuff without me having to interrupt you. It's a rare gem to have a guest like that. 10 likes and 2 dislikes so far on that video. I told you this in our pre-show talk a little while ago, and although there was one commenter that said this is boring. Well, apparently 10 likes versus 2 dislikes doesn't really seem to suggest boring, so I encourage listeners to check that out too. But I got you on for 45 to 50 minutes today. Don't think I can go a full hour because my guests are inviting me for New Year's Eve dinner, so it's great to have you on. Let me just give out a little disclaimer of sorts to my listeners. I actually haven't had a chance to upload the previous 2 shows that I've done since Christmas Day. Well, I did upload them, but I've listed them as unlisted because I plan to try to monetize my show by having my listeners click on the links to the shows off Patreon and not YouTube to be able to find them, which of course requires them to have to pay me a little bit of a fee. I'm not a sellout. It's just the opportunity to make a little money off my work. And Andrew Bartzis, the Akashic Records reader, and others have said it's time for more people that want to wake other people up to try to monetize their work. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, and it shows the universe that we still love money, even though it's meant to control us, and can profit off things if we set our minds to it. So, um, got to listen off Patreon, folks. Soon, I will make sure I get those other 2 interviews and this one up to YouTube. But well, I mean, uploaded and with the links prepared soon, so you guys can check them out. 2 to 3 weeks though after I upload them to YouTube and put the link on Patreon, I will have the interviews available for everybody off YouTube and also Cost.tv. And please listen off Cost.tv instead of YouTube, folks, to help me monetize off the blockchain that Cost.tv runs on. Just listen to the YouTube video for 15 seconds to give me a YouTube view credit. Those view credits never never hurt. And then listen to the whole interview on Cost.tv. If you click on the YouTube interview before the Cost.tv link is there, just listen to the whole thing on YouTube. It's not a big deal. It takes a little time to upload videos to Cost.tv compared to YouTube. So now that I've babbled long enough about my disclaimer, so I guess and all that, and bit pessimistic about the new year, what's good about it. But anyway, um, Elliot, you've got the floor. I presume that you called me among also trying to get the link to the last interview, and that you and I did. You had a few things on your mind that you want to talk about. I mean, I know I should. It's always I should let my guests speak. I don't interrupt them. I don't have Alex Jones-itis, but seeing how the first interview went, it may not be such a bad idea for you to me to ask you to try not to ramble on and on and on for 40 minutes without giving me the chance to say a few things, because I'm sure I'll have a couple questions I want to throw in. So why don't we get the important things out? Elliott Haines, you got the floor, but please don't take 40 minutes.
Oh, no, I will be a bit more mindful of that, but it's like the ball of yarn, and the thread goes to it, and it can really be a marvelous situation for a cat to make the ball roll around and have it, unravel. But what I tried to do is follow guidance from my ancestors that sort of encourage thoughts to come into mind. And one of the big ones was just in the past 2 years that the water cycle, the hydrologic cycle of evaporation with an arrow to the word, condensation with the word to precipitation, and that was taught to me 60 some years ago, and it's still being put forth today. Those 3 arrows going around are impressive, and everybody knows them as the water hydrologic cycle. What I came up with and what was made sense was when it precipitates as rain, it's rainwater, and then people go, well, that's H2O, 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, and water water is life, and they point to Father Sky and say, thank you, Father Sky, water is life. But the realization was that all the mammalian creatures, and those are the people who are listening, two-leggeds and maybe some four-leggeds, but the obviously audience is bipeds. All mammalian animals usually seek shelter when it rains. They don't run around with their mouth open to see about getting that life-sustaining force. And that's what kind of put the light bulb into my mind, that it isn't water that's life. 2H and 1O is vacant. 2 molecules of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen. What the mammalian creature needs is that which all the four-legged mammalian animals have been doing since the beginning. They've been looking down at the source, the sacred Mother Earth. She births the mineral water of all life. Four-legged first, two-legged came along after. That is what is life for all of us, and that's what needs to be honored. And yet, at this time, this is information that I've gleaned for the past X number of decades. There's a garbage truck filled with plastic that's being dumped in waterways every 30 seconds of every day around the globe. And 2.5 years ago, it was once every minute. Now, I spoke at the end of the year in 2017, and I had gotten that information, and at that time it was the every minute with the dumping. It's a carpet of plastic. You can't see the stream. One of the things that came up was that there was a fish from Hancock, Maryland area on the Potomac River that was gotten out 5 years or so ago, and it was strange. They took it to the state natural resources, and the biologist said, yeah, this is a hermaphroditic fish. It's got male sex organs and female sex organs. So this is going to be somewhat tangential, and it'll have an overall thread to it. The first one is that the CO2 is going up into the atmosphere from the fossil fuel oil production and the energy and the burning thereof. That passed 420 parts per billion in September of last year, 2019. Don't know what it is right now, but obviously global warming is. There is a second aspect of what I also have sort of put together. The chefs say stick a fork into the item being cooked, usually meat, and see if it's done. I'm using figuratively that the oil fossil fuel industry is sticking a fork into the living planet, because what's happening is the CO2 levels is one prong of a two-pronged fork. A second prong is that which is the xenoestrogen, which is coming from the biodegradation of the trashed plastic. 97% of the fluid on the earth is salt, 1.25% is frozen, and approximately 1.25% of the overall is fresh. That dumping of plastic trash is contaminating that 1.25% that is sustaining the approximately 3/4 billion people on the planet. So because of this overall observation that the hydrologic cycle didn't take into effect the significance that the universal solvent water is coming out of the sky, and it is acidic. It's aggressive, but it doesn't become life-sustaining until it's in contact with some stone or meteor that's resting on the earth, or something that's coming from the earth, a plant, grass, leaves, trees, dirt, lakes, rivers, anything that's connected to the Mother Earth has picked up that which is the essence of mammalian life because of the universal solvent. So it picks it up. It then becomes mineral water. The four-leggeds gather around the watering hole, or they don't, but they go there, they drink from it, and then the body makes it to be a supplementation of their needs for minerals, which allows their bloodstreams to have electrolytes, and the hydrologic magic machine works. The bipeds saw what the four-leggeds were doing. They also were no doubt drinking from the pond, puddle, lake, stream, river, creek. So if we had truly the appreciation for the sacredness, we've got one blue planet. We've got one mothership, and we're flying. She's flying us to wherever we're going. And if we don't have the respect for that all giving and all receiving sacred femininity to provide us that which has allowed us to be here for who knows how many thousands or generations of years, we are, as Greta Thunberg says, and she's getting it from information, headed for the next mass extinction. So I feel the depth of her conviction from thousands of her generations to have her come to this point in time. She is a gift because she was a sole person who was going and sitting in front of the Swedish Parliament and having Fridays to be bringing to the attention of the politicians about what's going on with global warming and global change. So my position in all this is I'm 3.5 houses in Pisces and an attorney with 20 years on her side venture of being a person who did charts, shared with me at Serpent Mountain, Ohio, back in August of 17, that no wonder I was working with water with 3.5 houses in Pisces. That's just a little aside. So it was apparently in 20 years. She started when she was 14 doing charts, and then she became an attorney, and then she was at the Serpent Mountain gathering in August, as I said. So I'm following the pattern of my ancestors to have me be mindful of various and sundry things. I'm kind of guided to hear things or see things. Here's a specific one that happened June of 1997 at 6 o'clock and 6:30 in the morning. I heard on public radio chlorine, cancer, and the National Cancer Institute mentioned as a story. It was there for the 2 times, 6 and 6:30. They killed the story. It was never again heard that day. 3 weeks later, I was in the area of Jefferson, Maryland, and I heard Paul Harvey speaking, and he said, National Cancer Institute, chlorine and cancer. I said, wait a minute, I haven't heard about that since about a month ago, 3 weeks ago. I drove to Fort Detrick, got on the base, went to the library, read the article, and the librarian wouldn't let me copy the 8 pages, 6/18/97, page 848 to 856. So these are the things that are being done to people to keep them from knowing what is out there. For over a decade, it was not available on the internet unless a person paid $350 to subscribe to the Journal of NCI's publication, a taxpayer-supported publication, mind you. $350 back in June of 97, and if they did so, they were sent a password to read the June article. Otherwise, it wasn't. So when I read the synopsis page and it stood out like highlighted by some force, my mind or whatever, it said potent mammalian cell carcinogens happen when chlorine mixes with organic material. It stood out to me. And then it proceeded to say that these disinfectant byproducts, quote, contribute to or directly cause stomach cancer, bladder cancer, colon cancer, kidney, liver, thyroid, pituitary, lung, and leukemia, which is 9 of the 15 most frequent cancers anywhere on the globe where chlorine is used by the municipality, 3/5 are out there, and that's what they didn't want people to know, that Aunt Helen, who had bladder cancer, died, and she lived in a town, and she bought bottled beverages. All bottled beverages, no matter on the globe, if they're using chlorine, all they do is put it through a smell and taste reduction, which does no thing to reduce the potent carcinogens of a tasteless and odorless chemical compound that contributes to those 9 cancers. So when I started putting this together, I realized that I had been led to it, to see it. But my partner, she was a nurse, and she got up, and I happened to hear the broadcast at 6 and 6:30. And again, never again. I contacted Oxford University Press, or was it Cambridge? Can't remember that, but the point of it was I called over to England, and it turns out their publishing was in Triangle Park, North Carolina. So I actually read it at the library and then had a hard copy of it as well. Now, it was a $550 billion cancer industry in 1997. It's over $750 billion now. And that's one reason they didn't want to have people knowing about it easily to get it on the internet. The internet wasn't that big, obviously, in June of 97. So I'm piecing together things that are sort of to keep people in the compliant consumer mindlessness of shopping, numb from the neck up, to see an advertisement and, basically reflexively reach for their wallet or their credit card to buy something. In fact, a little aside, too, you can go back to Shrub 10 days after 9/11, back in 2001, and he's standing at a podium, and he's talking about what these bastardly bastards have done. And I don't know how long he goes on, but he gets down to literally the last 6 or 7 or 8 seconds, and he's looking at the audience, and when a person's looking at the screen, to the left of the screen there is a person in a dark suit, and to the right of the trump of a shrub being in the middle is a person in uniform, so Secret Service, military. And Shrub says, "Don't," he's got his hand pointed towards the crowd with a finger pointed out, and he says, "Don't worry about the terrorist." And he moves it slightly to his left and says, "Just go shopping." And he has this fake, exaggerated laugh with a cackle, and then he kind of breaks into a grin. And that's the distillation of what's going on in the overall about forces that want people to be nothing but cogs in the wheel, to see about having the machinery go around, to see about purchasing more stuff. The conglomerates, the corporations, the manufacturing make stuff, and they need people. They need people to buy it. The military-industrial complex knows that bullets and armament is more profitable than bread. And that was one reason why Eisenhower, when he handed off to JFK, said something that was basically, beware the military-industrial complex. So that's a little aside in a tangent, but, those are things that have been seen and can't unerase them, and they're out there, and especially the thing with Mr. Bush. Certainly, he was part of an oil family, and so he certainly wanted to see about having continuation of things, but enough about that. The point of it is, I'm trying to stand up for the planet, which is all giving, all receiving, as I said, and especially since it's that essence of 1.25% of the global covering of H2O is the fresh stuff, and it needs to be revered and respected, because healthy air to breathe, healthy hydration to follow in the footsteps of the bipeds as well as the quadrupeds that came beforehand, to see about getting it directly from, or if one can't get it directly from, the Mother Earth, and not many people are going to go around drink from streams and creeks and rivers, etc., but to see about having something made healthy use, because point of use is the only thing right now that's going to allow people to have some surety, a certainty, to see about having the healthiest mineral water, enhanced so it's more so than that which is created by the one Earth Mother. There's naturally occurring in the ground arsenic 5. There's also radon from decaying rock beneath the aquifers. When the decaying rock happens, it causes a creation of radon. Radon will be in the aquifers that are tapped into. So when people drill a hole in the ground to get their own source, what they're also getting for their family is a direct connection to the radon, which will follow the water line, come up into the house through the water line to the sink and to the shower. Now, if it's in a spring that the water is coming out from the earth, it has a chance to outgas the radon. But when it's coming in a contained fashion from the drilled down depth, whatever it is, to tap into it, it's going to be contained and coming up into the house. And radon is is twice as carcinogenic as secondhand cigarette smoke. And that's the stuff that hasn't been inhaled by the biped who buys the cigarettes.
Oh, hold on just a second. I can't help but stop there for use there for a second. Yes, radon definitely more harmful than, well, okay, it's extremely harmful, but you just suggested that secondhand smoke is harmful. Interesting how I was pointing out with a recent guest, that I actually am of the opinion that, and I think maybe there is some truth to the harmfulness of commercial cigarettes, which are garbage. But when you're talking about genuine organic tobacco, hand-rolled cigars, and also pipe tobacco from tobacco, Mapacho tobacco that comes fresh out of the Amazon, which, by the way, when I get it, the packages are actually label it not as tobacco but Amazonian incense, and the reason, and there's a good reason for that, because I believe that the for good tobacco, that the secondhand smoke conspiracy of sorts is a conspiracy to cover up the fact that secondhand smoke is not really a bad thing. In fact, it actually works as good as cleaning the area out of negativity, as good as incense does. Genuine, real incense is as good as secondhand smoke. And I've been to some conferences, and I'm sure Chief Golden Light Eagle would certainly have something to say about this, because you
Sure.
know him from the conference where I first met you at, that tobacco is a sacred plant. The Native Americans did smoke it in ritual ceremonies, and they would also probably assert that secondhand smoke is, for all intents and purposes, as good as, if not better than, incense at clearing out negativity. So you're saying it's harmful? Well, I couldn't help but throw that out. Any comments on this?
But I support. I mean, hemp, of course, is a sacred plant, and it's been demonized because of the nylon industry, because of DuPont wanting to see about having ropes made for the Navy out of their chemicals, not to use the plant to make ropes. And so Anslinger was a friend of J. Edgar Hoover. Anslinger had some people in Hollywood, and they were behind having the movie Reefer Madness created to demonize the plant. When you say about the plant, yes, the stuff though and the chemicals that are put in the conventional stuff were made to be nicotine delivery systems, and all the chemicals that are unleashed with those. But that would digress to a point. But I agree, Andrew, that there are sacred plants, and it's like smudging to take sage through a place to get rid of the evil things that might be there, and it might be there on the Amazonian tobacco. But that was just an aspect of radon is naturally occurring. It's tasteless and odorless. You can't see it and all the rest of the stuff, but it needs to be removed from that which is the water that's coming out, which is what people are using to sustain themselves to live, not only for washing themselves, but they're ingesting it when they're getting it right from their spigot at their house if they have their own source in the ground. And I also don't say well, because that gives a connotation, a denotation as such, that it's okay, it's great, because it's well water, as opposed to poor water or demonized water, because it turns out the brass well pumps, which were put in up until 1994, only 1 to 1.25% of the well pumps that were installed for people who had their own source in the ground was a stainless steel well pump. The rest of them were brass, and people hundreds of thousands, millions of wells still have bad, not well water because those well pumps are brass and they're leaching lead. It was 1994 when there was a federal trade thing to see about banning all brass well pumps, and it was mandated that the states from then on, all sources in the ground of water coming out had to be stainless steel. They're much more expensive, but they don't leach lead, tasteless and odorless lead. So, this is getting back to the fact of the liquid, the air that's being breathed obviously is less in oxygen levels these days because of things that are beyond my mind and capability of understanding. But so the aspect of the H2O, what Mother Nature creates is real, and she has the need to see about having it improved upon because of the fact the arsenic levels for EPA safe drinking water is 10 parts per billion. It used to be 50 parts per billion back in the 40s, and it was that all the way through until the late time of Slick Willie's being in an office when his group of scientists came up with the idea of making it 10 parts per billion of arsenic 5. When Shrub came into office, he's we're not going to have that go back to the way it was. So for 3 years, he put together or had a group of scientists come back, and 3 years later, in 2003, it was determined that it should be probably lower than 10 parts per billion, but certainly 10 parts per billion. So reluctantly they did. But these are because of the machinations of the corporations. They've paid off enough politicians. They've had enough influence to buy their way into controlling that which is supposed to be of, by, and for the people. And what's going on there also with the tobacco industry. So, those people were there on the Hill and they were swearing, all these heads of cigarette companies about their product. It's been known, obviously, since the mid-50s and earlier about that. So, but that was because they were engineered to be addictive, and they were engineered to see about having phosphorus in the rings of the paper. So once it was lit up, it was an expended cigarette, and they would have to buy some more if they forgot about it and put it into the ashtray. And while it was still burning, when the person would come back because they got diverted into something, it would be nothing but a long tubular thing of ash, and we smoked down to or it would just keep burning until it got to the filter, or it did the entire thing if it was a filter cigarette. So back to the H2O aspect is wherever a person is, point of use is the only thing right now that can see about dealing with it, because we don't have enough people. We don't have enough living creatures being mindful of that sacredness. They turn on the faucet to brush their teeth, and who knows how many, what the flow level is for the gallons per minute is going down the tube. Well, it doesn't smell good and doesn't taste good because it's municipal tap chemicals. And the number of things that their Safe Drinking Water Act is less than 100 things. I think the EPA has almost 90,000 chemicals registered with them. And because of that huge load of chemicals that are already loaded in to their system, they don't have the time and money to see about testing for everything. So it goes down to, I think it's less than 90, certainly less than 100. So, and there's more and more things that are being found out and discovered that are harmful. We now know that there's parts per, it used to be parts per 100, parts per thousands, parts per millions, parts per billions, and now it's even known that even parts per trillion are harmful because every person has their own sensitivity. But the overall is when it gets masked and added together and there's synergistic effects that happen, these things can be more harmful to the mammalian cell creature. What I was thinking about earlier was CO2 to LBGTQ. The CO2 I've already mentioned about the carbon dioxide. The thing that is the LBGTQ situation is that which is the xeno, Xeno estrogen. Fossil fuel chemicals are what is being used to make plastics, probably 97, 98% of all plastics. They can be made from plants, but the oil i.e. with nylon and other things back in the 30s, have the idea of plastics. So they have to have their oil being used in another market, and it's the plasticization of the planet. But it's also, and this is the key for the second prong of the fork, the plasticization of food and beverage. That is what came also as the light bulb going on, because the molecules of plastic, any plastic, are similar in structure to estrogen, the female hormone. The molecules having that similarity, it's called xeno, meaning foreign or from an outside source. Plasticization of beverages means that everything that's contained in plastic will have and follow the scientific thing that the molecules of plastic will leach from greater concentration to lesser concentration. And the lesser concentration is the fluid in the ingestible quote-unquote food that's put in the microwave, which accelerates the plastic transferring into the food and all these other things. So the endocrine disruption that's happening because of the xenoestrogen of plastic is a contributing factor to the ever greater and more formidable and more noteworthy thing of people being honored for being who they are, as being lesbian, gay, straight, bi, queer, transgender, whatever. The point of it is that it also should be pointed out that the big thing that's also factoring into it, plastic nipples, plastic on the water, on the bottles for weaning, and they were also using plastic tubing to go into IV patients. So this was something from the yearly financial statement of one of the top 10 insurance companies. It talked about some other places that they had. The company was Tyco. It was back in the late 90s. And I saw in there that there were some nuns in a hospital in California, Catholic Hospital, San Francisco, and they were pointing out to the board of directors that the tubing was made out of plastic, and they were concerned about the plastic molecules. They didn't specify it that way. It was just saying that the plastic tubing probably wasn't good for the patients. So that was a little factoid that I just remembered, as a matter of fact, in the past 2 or 3 months. What's happening now is glass at the point where it's not even being recycled because there isn't sufficient amounts of it to allow it to be profitable for the recyclers to take in glass. That's how much the oil industry is pushing their plastic market agenda. The biodegradation of the plastic will never biodegrade to oil. It will only break down to, and this is a term you've no doubt heard or seen, but it will break down to the nanoparticles of plastic that have been found in the streams in the upper portions of Michigan and Wisconsin and the headwaters of the Great Lakes. That's in the water, the nanoparticles of plastic, because of the breakdown of what's been plastic trash and who knows what else that was to see about getting it there. The point of it is that's getting into the fish. That was a contributing factor to that hermaphroditic fish near Hancock, Maryland. It's happening to people left, right, and sideways. When people have symptoms, they'll go in to see about going to a medical person or go to a counselor. And what's happening more and more is this country doesn't have a managed health care. We have a managed sick care because 20 to 30 cents of every dollar that is spent goes into the insurance company's pockets first, and the only $60 trillion force in the world that I saw some time ago was saying the insurance industry. So if people are having thoughts whether or not they're gay, straight, or bi, they have a term called gender dysphoria and gender confusion, and they'll liken it back to hormones, this, that, and the other, but they don't take it back to the xenoestrogen, the fake hormone that they're getting in what they ingest, what they purchase to buy to drink, and the single-use bottles of plastic. So this is where I'm talking about people being concerned for their loved ones. Their loved ones should be, in some regards, charge first and foremost their self, because just like when flying in a plane, the announcement for the pre-flight is if there's decompression in the cabin of the plane, the mask come down, put it on yourself before you help out your traveling compartment, compart, your traveling partner, or if you're in charge of some other youngster, you want to help them too if they're not old enough to do it themselves. But it's basically put the mask on yourself to take care of it. If people started being concerned about who they are, where they are, and that their connectivity to every other living creature, and that they have the second most important ingredient for life, being mineral water that is gifted to us, not from Father Sky. It's not that emptiness. It's that which is hungry and wants to get that which it once was, life sustaining. And that's where Dr. Emoto comes in, because his book from Japan, Dr. Emoto is saying that water may have memory. And this is beyond my three-dimensional on the one hand, but I certainly can.
Hold on a second. Before you get into the Emoto stuff, something that I wanted to ask you
Yes.
about rainwater versus other forms of water. One interesting fact about crystals is, well, you wouldn't expect this with crystals because they're like rocks, and rocks aren't expected to dissolve, but there are a couple of crystals like calcite and selenite that they say don't put in water, they will dissolve. But there was after I had gotten some sort of a reading from psychic medium, channeling an entity from my family side about a property that I was living on a little over a year and a half ago. Um, it was talking about putting crystals and gemstones around the property in order to
Yes.
um, amplify it of some way. And selenite was one of the ones that they asked me to put out. Um, and there had been many, many rainstorms in the time that since I put those crystals out, and eventually had to pick them up because I was moving to another property. But the selenite that had been out in the rain in the open, I didn't put it in any place where the rain would not get to it. I actually put it like in out in the open, and it got rained on many times, and it did not appear to get any smaller, which kind of leads me to think that
Mm-hmm.
rainwater is comprised of a different essence that will cause it not to dissolve selenite. Do you know anything about that?
Not specifically selenite, but the point of having rocks is that they are giving off vibrational energy. I'm near Bath in West Virginia, which has become the town of Berkeley Springs. There was a hydrologist who had been 40 years with the State Department, and he told somebody back in '98 at the Berkeley Springs Water Fest in the last weekend of February of that year, '98, that there were five distinct waters in the world, and one of the five was Berkeley Springs. And that was his opinion because of all that he had found. What I also learned that the Indian tribes didn't war in that area because they realized the sacredness of the waters that were coming out in Berkeley Springs. That was one reason why George Washington took a bath there, and it became the first spa because it was because of his family and other people of power and influence. So the idea that there are things that seem not to, but they give off energy, and what I found out in speaking with somebody down by the run near the state park is that the waters coming through these, well, there's also U.S. silica that is getting silica probably for computers, etc. But those, they found an 800-pound geode, and the energy coming off these things is palpable to some people. I've had a person who has gotten a system that I offer to people because of its certified capability to undo the things that man has done to the water and increase the value of what Mother Nature has created, that they could feel the vibrational energy of Cincinnati tap water once it had been gone through, and somebody else from another place could feel the energy of the water in the Los Angeles area. I'm not.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, fair enough. But one other somewhat related to this, the myth, legend story of Ponce de Leon trying to find the Fountain of Youth in Florida. Um, if there was a Fountain of Youth, it could have just been a metaphor for some specific special water that had come out of the the ground, and it didn't make you younger per se. It just made you like feel younger. Like I feel many years younger, as people say when they drink some sort of a magic elixir, like you see in the cartoons. But this was genuine, real water that seemed to have an essence to it. And Ponce de Leon tried to find it. Any knowledge about what that was all about?
And that's the key. And but you see the significance that it is the mineral water, and they're not addressing the waters of life. But you see, this is the connection of having the term mineral because of that factor. When it's coming out of the sky, it's not mineral water unless there's been an explosion of a volcano that put pulverized rock up. Then that's not going to be there for more than a day or two. If it rains, it's going to pick up the mineralization there. But that's not what we're talking about. It's the stuff that's down there because of the rain that doesn't have the dissolved crushed rock from a volcano, and then it comes down and then picks it up because it's hungry. And that was the thing to tie back to Emoto. I don't, I just picked up that little bit because that's where the hungriness comes in because it may have a memory that it did before. But the basic simple, it's like the saying goes, even the smallest person can make a significant difference because of knowing what is the fact. And what it is we need to respect that one ship we're flying on, the 1.25% of the sacred fresh water that's on the surface, and the stuff that's beneath the ground, the fracking and the fossil fuel want to take these chemicals that they'd have to pay to get rid of and inject them back into the earth so that they're out of sight, out of mind. And that's going to be obviously not good for that which is the sacred mother. So the monetization and the overall capitalistic thing that's going on, we need to be in concert with and work with the resources to have that respect to native peoples collectively appreciated all elements. They gave thanks for the animal giving up its life, and they used the skins to see about keeping them warm in the wintertime and various and sundry things. But the overall mechanicalization and the industrialization and the distributor, what's it called? Yes, it's called the production line, to see about having more chickens processed and everything like that, which is why there's so many injuries and everything like that. We're not slowing down to see about saying, wait a second, I realize that this water makes me feel good, and it's because it's got life and the energy in it because the minerals that are in the water will hold the vibrational energy. Now, I know that somebody could probably do a scientific and have the equipment to see about verifying that. I'm just going along with the fact that having the cleanliness of healthy mineral water made healthy at point of use is something that is so refreshing and so life-changing because it helps detoxify what's going on and into people's bodies from what they're putting in their, as I said again, what they buy at the store, they use it once and throw it away. It's conditioned in them to do so. That's why there are so many plastic bottles that are around. The Pacific Gyre and north of the Hawaiian Islands is twice the size of the state of Texas, and much of that is plastic stuff that's floating like 3 to 5 inches beneath the surface, so it's not even picked up visually on maps, but it's known by people who sail through it, and I think there's 7 of them on the globe, or 6. But the point of it is, if we have so much more fossil fuel plastic trash being dumped in the waterways, that is going to cause more and more people to have symptoms. They'll go and not know why they're feeling that way. They don't know if they're straight, gay, or bi. The biggest cause of death between 17 and 44 is suicide. And some people, if they just had a clue or if they had their grandsters or their guardians there to let them know that what's happening is something that they've got to work through, but they're okay. Everyone, just about everyone, is okay if they honor the life force that got them there. Because we never.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you again, but I kind of want to close this interview on this subject matter that you're talking about right now about the plastic in the ocean because, well, um, they say it's a bad idea to always want to ask the angels to come and save us. We got to do our own part. But I have had at least one person on my radio show say that the ETs are. What do we have to do to make them do this? I don't know. I didn't really get into that, I believe, but he something about the ETs, the angels, the whatever you want to call them, entities that are good, want to take a lot of the plastic out of the ocean and find some use for it. Wishful thinking, maybe, but certainly would be a wonderful thing to help get get rid of the disease that Mother Earth has to deal with having plastic floating in our oceans. So, any idea about whether or not there could be truth to that?
Well, if they were putting at least good deposits on things, so people didn't say, "Well, it's only a nickel," and they throw it away. If there was something like dollars attached to every bottle, there'd be more concern with it and everything like that. And if we could get away from it and go back to things like glass that don't leach, they break, yeah, but let's have this more concern, not tossing things around willy-nilly and go for the convenience and also the huge profit margin. When water is being sold for a mill of a cent for 100 or 1,000 gallons, of course they want to see about getting water from the national parks. Like what we see, is it Poland Springs? No, not them. It's Nestle's. Nestle's has a $259 contract that they've had since 1970s, and one of the people in the government in the county that was issuing it is now working for Nestle's, and they still have that $250, $59 permit to see about getting water extracted from the areas east of Los Angeles and I think San Bernardino County or Orange County. So it's these things that are being done to make it, a thing. And I'm saying, hey, it's out there. It's come down out of the sky. Let's respect it, revere it. Let's take the stuff that's on the surface and not contaminate it and not use it as a sewer or a trash place to throw it, the single-use bottle over our shoulder and let somebody else take care of it, because it will never biodegrade to oil. Only the nanoparticles, and those things will, as I already said, cause encephalitis if it gets into a mammalian person's bloodstream. That's how small it is. And when it gets into the landfills, because it's so small and because of the buoyancy, when it gets exposed to rain, it actually will float up to the surface and go down the streams, creeks, down to the streams and creeks as it goes away from the landfills. So it's never going to be going away. It's forever. Literally, if it's burned, it's going up into the atmosphere and causing who knows all kinds of chemicals that are harmful to people for their asthma and for their health and breathing. But the big thing is water, point of use, and honoring that which is her gift to us and all living mammalian creatures. So if we can learn from the animals and see about drinking water from the source that is healthy, and if we can't do it and make the source healthy, we can see about having it go through something that can enhance what Mother Nature has created. So there's a health provider named Alan Williams, and his phone number is 240-625-7382. And he did a muscle test on a plastic water that was being gotten from Berkeley Springs. It was Berkeley Springs water, and it had a strength to it. He did a muscle strength on water that was going through the system that I was offering him, and it blew the strength of the plastic water from Berkeley Springs away. So his name's Alan Williams, as I said, and he's haptic brain, a musician. He's also been raising organic plants for 30 years, and so I was led to meet him by one of my guardians, and it's like family because we're on the same plane. We're trying to make a difference for the earth and for people so that they have the health that they are entitled to if they're mindful about what goes in their pie hole is impacting them. And often it's to your watercure.com. The title of the book that's at watercure.com that I suggest going to the library, the book's title is Your Body's Many Cries for Water. The subtitle is Don't Medicate Your Body's Signs of Thirst. It was published in '89, the decade of the 80s. 70% of all over-the-counter medications were for digestion and stomach problems. And two organizations, when that book came out, didn't say anything about the book or the author. The one private one was the AMA. The other one was the National Institutes of Health. they didn't want people to know that there was a solution to having people not have acid reflux. And I didn't know it at the time, but I loaned the book to somebody. Kurt Boyer is his name, and unbeknownst to me, he was paying a $22 copay for a $140 Prilosec prescription in March of 1998. He read the book, and in the book, the third chapter dealt with acid reflux. That's what he was having. He started drinking 8 to 12, 14 ounces of water 20 minutes to a half an hour before the meal. Kurt came back to the doctor a couple times. Doctor said, Kurt, you're not getting your prescription refilled. Kurt said, that's right. The doctor never asked him what he was doing differently. And what he was doing differently was taking the city chemicals and having it go through a system that made it better than the way it was created by the Earth Mother. He was drinking 8 to 12, 14 ounces of healthy mineral water at his fingertips, and he stopped paying the $22 a month copay for Prilosec in 1998. So,
Well, that's a great story there to be able to get off medicine just by doing a little work to make things better. So I am gonna have to cut this interview
oh,
off now because I was invited for New Year's dinner, and so that's gonna be starting in a couple minutes. So
I,
I'm glad you called to talk. You wanted to say one last thing here?
no, I was just going to say bon appetit, or if you don't have an appetite for bones, have good food. And
Funny you mention that because I actually bought a couple of rotisserie chickens from Giant. I usually shop at Whole Foods, but I shopped at Giant because I needed to tap a specific credit card that I don't shop at Whole Foods with to get some extra airline miles. And I bought some rotisserie chickens, and the bones, they were well nice enough to be able to actually chew them and eat them. So how funny you mention that. But never really thought bones could be edible, but they can be, and I guess that's one way to get calcium. So
organic.
thank you, and
Welcome. Thank you, Andrew.
okay, thank you very much. It was organic chicken, yes, so definitely good there. All right, take care now, and good luck, and rare gem having people like you who can just keep talking and talking and talking and not have me interrupt. But thank you very much. I will upload this to YouTube and hopefully Patreon. Provide the link very, very soon for my listeners who are chomping at the bit to listen to my shows again. Take care, good luck, and maybe I'll see you at a conference.
Excellent. Bye-bye. Namaste.